because you broke it.
Does someone have it? But it was cool. Well, yeah.
All right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. People are kind of wandering in, but it's their fault for being late. I have been instructed to ask you to please turn off your mobile phones. Apparently they do interfere with our recording, and we're being videotaped, and roughly half of you will listen to that as well. My name is Molly Wood. I'm an executive editor at CNET.com. CNET produces several podcasts and video podcasts and have integrated some advertising, and since we're such a small panel, maybe I can throw in some thoughts now and again without evangelizing too much. I am joined by Andy Plesser, Jeff Baer, and Robert Scoble. I will let them all introduce themselves and give a sort of short opening statement, and then I hope that we can have a fairly engaged discussion and that we can get you involved as soon as possible. Obviously, you guys know what you want to talk about, so we'll try not to monopolize it too much ourselves. Andy, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Molly. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm beginning to be a bigger blogger, but I was kind of nobody until I broke the news of Robert Scoble leaving Microsoft in June.
True. I didn't even know who he was.
He didn't know, and it was crazy. But basically, I created a video. We run a video blog about the online video industry and what's going on with the portals, the newer companies, the points of view of analysts, and it's something that we've just been working on since April. I have a background as a public relations guy, and we've sort of found that creating flash video on a blog platform really works. In other words, creating original information, having sound bites of 2 to 5 minutes, and basically creating a successful blogging strategy works in that people link to us. We have a lot of Google juice, and so we're very keen on sort of the whole notion of video blogging in the B2B space. In addition to doing our thing, we also are creating video blogs for companies and institutions like Fordham University for their law school. That we believe that there's a great opportunity to use video to create a new form of media, a new media platform that people like to see. So check out BTV, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of this stuff.
My name is Jeff Baer. I'm with Podzinger. A few of you probably have heard of us. If you haven't, you may have heard of our parent company, Bolt Newman, which one of the original MIT startups back in the day. What we're doing is essentially solving, I don't know if many of you saw Dr. Timothy Tuttle's presentation this morning at 9, but we're setting out to solve the audio-video search problem with more metadata via the world's best speech recognition, of which we have an exclusive license from BBN. So sort of two paths to market there. We have Podzinger.com, where we're aggregating freely available RSS content, as well as allowing users to register that content. And there we are sort of providing a Google-esque search experience. The side of the business that I'm more focused on is providing powered by Podzinger search to clients that have their number one asset as multimedia. So we're making the bet that if audio and or video is your number one asset, you don't really need simple text-based commodity search. And by applying our speech reco, which, as I mentioned, we have the world's best, we're creating essentially a full bag of words that is the rough transcript. In this space, everybody hesitates to call it a transcript. But then we apply a secondary natural language processing step by which we're binning the content into categories. Right now, we're focusing on 10 as they relate directly to the online advertising space, such as technology, news and politics, sports, those types of things. We also can filter out or filter you to adult content, if you wish, which happens to be a lot of the content that is registered with us. And in that, we're hoping to provide a more targeted advertising connection for advertisers and allow podcast creators and audio and video content creators to monetize without offending their audiences, because we really have a belief that information should be free. That's the general trend. If you take the limit going to infinity in the media space, information should be free, and technology is what's enabling that. And the cost of that freely available information is advertising, and more relevant, less offensive advertising is okay. And we also finished a focus group up back in August around this space, and I'd be happy to share some of the results of that. So,
I'm Robert Scoville, and I worked at Microsoft as one of the founders of the Channel 9 video blogging website, and carried around a $300 camera and walked into people's offices and said, "Who are you and what do you do?" and recorded that and put that out. And when the month I left Microsoft, we had 4.3 million unique visitors. And so that's sort of why I was interested in going and joining a startup, because I was seeing huge growth in audience without spending any money, all based on word of mouth, because the word of mouth network had become much more efficient. And so now I work at PodTech. I do a video show called Scoble Show, where I interview executives and geeks about the tech industry. And I'm also building a content mall, just like you guys and Adam Curry and Leo Laporte and Revision 3. And we're looking for great niche-oriented shows to bundle together in a mall, in a network. And by doing that, you can create a lot of value, as Jason Calacanis showed us, by creating Weblogs Inc. and selling that to AOL. So those are my two tasks right now.
So we are here to talk about the business of podcasting and video blogging. So before we get started, I wanted to ask the audience, how many of you are actually podcasting? So a lot. How many of you are video blogging and or podcasting, and maybe the same thing, like you? Okay. And how many of you, just out of curiosity, have moved from an audio podcast to video? Has anyone made that switch entirely? Kind of? Okay.
Entirely.
And then finally, how many of you are making any money? Ouch, right? All right, so that's what we're here to talk about. And I guess, the opening question for me to the panel would be essentially for each of you, is there money to be made on podcasting and video blogging?
Yeah, some of the numbers, like Rocket Boom is getting around 300,000 subscribers, and there's been some interesting fighting going on between Zay Frank and Andy Barron, who started Rocket Boom, but he's releasing his numbers, and they're sort of verifiable. And the CPMs he's getting are between $20 and $80, closer to the $80 figure, which is pretty interesting, because if you go to Cashfly, who's the distribution point for Dig and for Leo Laporte's shows and other places, they were quoting me 14 cents a gigabyte, which comes out to somewhere around 14 cents per thousand, or $14 per thousand. So there is some money to be made if you can build an audience, particularly if you can build an engaged and interesting niche audience on one topic where an advertiser wants to be involved. Seagate, for instance, is sponsoring my show without even having an audience. They just wanted to be next to my name because I had an audience on my blog. And that's certainly happening. I'm seeing there's an interesting interview with the guys who started Pod Show that just came up this morning. It might be on TechMeme, or I know Dave Weiner's blog linked to it. And they're saying they're collecting millions of dollars in advertising fees. FM Media, who is doing a network for blogging and for podcasting and video blogging, just saw $1 million month last month, their first $1 million sales month, and they pass along 60% of that to content producers. So, yeah, there's some money out there, and increasingly more money.
I think there's different business models when you look at video blogging, and Robert's approach to selling advertising, having a sponsor is one approach. I think that if you establish a great vertical market, a kind of a niche audience, if you will, that's desirable, you're going to get paid pretty well. So the advertiser, and then there's also opportunities that are evolving, as you've read the announcements from Bright Cove, that more and more companies are going to be selling post-roll video so that content developers can share that income, that revenue, which is cool. But the other thing is video blogging, as I see it, is an entirely new publishing platform that can be embraced by companies and individuals, institutions, for their own purposes. In a sense, they can create their own media platform. I come out of the public relations field, and I've been dying, my clients want us to get their on television. Well, you know what? Guess what? It's very difficult. Broadcast is very limited. Why don't you start your own TV channels? So we've done that, and we believe that's a big opportunity, and that companies, whether you're a corporation, whether you're a consulting firm, whether you're a university or institution, you have the opportunity to create your own TV platform. It's very, very simple to do. So there's a value of that to your institution. For us as a consulting firm, there's a value to us implementing these programs for clients that we've done for Fordham University, their law school. They want to show how cool their students and how cool their faculty. So using video is a great way to unlock the intellectual capital of an institution. So for
Yeah, and it's wide open. I mean, I did an analysis of Google's top products, and I did the Google product name video demo. And I could only find, I think, one or two out of the dozens of products that they have that they've actually spent time to take a cheap camera, aim it at the screen, and just give a simple demo. And that certainly is going to be built out over the next year. And you're right, Channel 9 and on 10 at Microsoft are showing that you can build a sizable audience inside a company. Right? That's completely sponsored by Microsoft employees, but by doing interesting content, people will link to it. People will, come over and check it out, and you'll find it in the search engines eventually. In fact, when I did that Google search engine analysis, I found several of my Microsoft videos when I searched for Google product name video, because the linking behavior is so strong on these videos. We did a demo when the Internet Explorer team announced RSS. We did a video, we did a standard press release, and then they did a full-blown standard website. My video got 20 times the links of the other two because people want to see what you're trying to talk about.
Right. So then, Jeff, is there money to be made?
Certainly. That's definitely the bet we're making anyway.
Yeah.
I think.
And I guess the question ultimately, too, is there money to be made for everyone? And that's what, we keep coming back to this, if you can build an audience and if you can have a niche, and if it's so easy for you to start
I'm a
doing
book
this.
author, and I learned that there's a very steep, long tail. The first 100 books make money. After that, nobody my book is usually around 1,000 on Amazon out of 1.5 million books. We're not making that much money at that spot.
And
so,
Jeff, you're talking about a lot of different categories.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we're aggregating the world's, very random and disparate content and funneling it. And even at that, we don't have a huge level of reach at this point. And so we're making more of a bet, in the advertising world, reach and composition. The reach is coming, and that's what we're all working to grow the traffic in order to do that by providing, the content that people want to see. But I think more important is the ability to associate your brand with someone like Mr. Scoble and his service. That's what podcasting really delivers. And so I don't know that a CPM model really is the best way to quantify it. I think it's more of a what's it worth to be associated. And frankly, the tools don't really exist yet to prove what that is. And that's why I think sponsorship has taken sort of a leading edge. And then after multiple rounds of sponsorship, I think that more of a bidding scenario will come through, which will enable more of an open market. And then, who knows, 3 years, 5 years, 3 months, I don't know when, but that's when you'll probably be able to see more of the CPM.
Yeah, Jeff, I agree. I think, video casting on a commercial advertising-supported basis is sort of like the early days of television where you had the Geritol Hour or the Alcoa Hour, that there's brands that want to be affiliated, and I think that's going to happen. I wanted to just maybe talk about another topic about video bloggers and video casters in a very basic term of publishing their video online. I publish in Flash. CNET publishes in Flash. Scoble does not.
I'm a loser.
I think it's a discussion that needs to happen. I publish through Google, and there's absolutely no cost, and as there would be with Brightcove or YouTube or any number of these free file sharing. Of course, you give up some rights. I mean, a CNET would never do something like that, but there is some question about Flash. Flash is, as you know, is sort of ubiquitous now. It's on 95% of the browsers, as I understand.
But it's not on iPods. So you
It's
don't
not on
reach
iPods,
Right.
yeah. But
So
It's
we're
not on Sony.
we're double publishing then.
I'm actually looking at the investment it takes to get a file onto like PlayStation, because my son has a Sony PlayStation. He likes watching videos there. iPod, so that needs a separate format. Windows Media Center, which a lot of people next February are going to buy these things to hook up to their TV sets, and that needs a WMV format, which is separate from what I'm doing too. Yeah, and it goes on and on. Zune's coming out. That needs another format.
There's an interesting
So
question
you can have a whole
about-
string of Macs all crunching video out for these various things.
Well, there's an interesting question there about, and this is kind of an interesting fundamental difference between what Jeff and Andy are doing, about aggregation versus distribution, and how Andy's model is obviously that Google will come to you, whereas Jeff, it seems like your model is you don't need Google. I can get you found, or I can get you on Google, as opposed to them having to kind of dig you out. So as we see advertising becoming more important, I guess, will the model actually move away from this sort of distribution, RSS, the feed thing, and move on to a specific page
well, I think
or aggregator?
Well, let me just mention that. I think that there's two issues. For my experience, what we've been doing is since we publish on a blog page and we have a lot of metadata, it's very searchable, and we get more and more search and traffic, and that creates more Google juice. So that a lot of our stuff, comes through. I interviewed Chad Hurley of YouTube, and when the announcement was made about Google a couple of weeks ago, and people searched Chad Hurley, BTV came up as #1 or #2. So searchability across general search is really, really important. And we accomplished that by putting a lot of metadata around the video clip. As Tim mentioned this morning, that's very key. So I think that's...
You don't even need, even if you do it badly like I do, JotSpot got bought by Google this morning. And if you search for JotSpot video, you'll find my video, and I'm not doing any work at all like you are. It's just based on linking behavior, because if people start linking to one thing, and these videos drive a lot of linking behavior if they're well done, they get you found for a variety of terms. In other words, the bloggers are providing the metadata for the
That's
search
right.
engine.
That's right. It's another channel, and that's how Rocket Boom's success has been incredible. But search, I think, is like if you say, well, I want to search about streaming media. I go to Google and I want to know about streaming online video, and I do that. You're going to find a page with that information, and you're going to find a player, and you're going to click it on, and you're going to learn about something and meet this person who has something to say. And it's not because you're tied into you have it on RSS, or because you have a link that someone sent along to you, which is cool. But finding video through the open search of the web is a very powerful thing.
How is the
Wait,
Oh, go
Jeff
ahead.
gets to go.
Yeah. Okay.
I was
So
going to ask a question and try to get there.
He's a nice, quiet man. He's not going to get to say very much today.
sure. Gentle giant. So I think that I think essentially the consumer is going to drive this response. The consumer is going to, wherever they can find it the most easily. If it is Google,
Right.
that's where they will go. And and then we'll be trying to figure out how to make Google juice to find our way into Google. We're very strongly rallied behind the Podzinger experience, and I don't know if you guys have seen that, and I'm not trying to totally push it, but you ought to check it out, because we've been searching for probably a decade via metadata text search, and our eyes are very good at quickly scanning a search results page and saying, yeah, this is what I want. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. And different things like linking behavior can drive that first search results page to content you're probably looking for. But what we're finding at Podzinger and with our partners is that because we're exposing what we call a snippet, a couple of sentences before and a couple of sentences after the queried term, allowing you to mouse over and start the file directly from any of those words, it's really allowing the user to have that same sort of quick assessment. Is this what I want, or is this what I not want? And so you'll notice in our player that we have a download an RSS button so that you could subscribe. But we're not finding a lot of people actually using that. They're spending 30, 35 minutes in Podzinger looking for streaming media, looking for Microsoft Zune, and they're consuming the media on that first search results page. And for that reason, I don't know that traditional search, what the problem is bandwidth in the sense that if you can't clearly know if it's what you want to consume or not, you have to spend time consuming it, which involves downloading it and then watching it. And we have sort of a shortcut to that.
So we're sort of veering off into discoverability, but I want to kind of return to the money
Sure.
for a little bit. And just to kind of get this off the table, it seem to be very clearly talking about advertising. Is there, really quickly, a viable subscription model, or are we specifically talking about ad-supported content as we move into trying this discussion of making money?
I don't believe that the subscriber model works in this space, and I think, frankly, because as the advertising model grows, I think advertisers are willing to pay more than we are to present us with that information.
So are we unanimously agreed we're only going to talk about advertising? Cool.
There could be some premium advertising within sites, but generally it'll be free.
Yeah.
In the porn industry.
Well,
Of course.
yeah.
We'll get to the porn model, I'm sure. So then when we're talking about advertising, what are you finding that listeners are willing to accept? How do you develop and feed them kind of advertising in an acceptable way?
Well,
I mean, I'm seeing a lot of models take place. If you're on the Zay Frank model, and where does he host his stuff on? Oh God, it's not Blip. So several of these. So there's Blip, there's Google Video, there's YouTube, there's Rever. He's on Rever. Sorry, Rever is putting an ad at the end of his video file and then sharing the revenue with him, and they're getting. From what I heard from people, they're getting $16 to $50 CPMs, which makes money for him. He's also doing a really interesting response model. During his videos, he'll say, I have a snack for the ORG, join my ORG. And he's getting his audience to join this community. And you can see a map of 30,000 little duckies, he calls them, because any viewer of Zay Frank is a little ducky. Right. And now he's actually selling advertising to his viewers that way. So you can buy a little ducky on his webpage and pay $50 for it. He collected $10,000 last week that way alone. He has an audience of around 30,000 people. Rocket Boom says they have an audience of 300,000. I came up and said we need a new metric called engagement, because I sense Zay Frank's audience is way more engaged right now than Rocket Boom's audience is. I was on Rocket Boom a couple of weeks ago, and I only got a few hundred visitors from them, where if Zay mentions you, I got thousands of visitors from them. Dig, when I'm on Dig, I get 60,000 visitors from their audience, right? So their audience is very engaged and very willing to click on things and very willing to buy things and try things.
Right.
So that's going to be an interesting way to look at audiences over time. Are they willing to do things? Are they willing to join communities? Are they willing to sign up for stuff? Are they willing to buy little donation buttons and stuff like that? Around 30,000, according to what he was saying.
So with the launch of our Podzinger 2.0, which brought about the advertising serve capability, we decided before we did that to conduct a focus group, or multiple actually, in L.A., Chicago, New York, and thousands of people we presented with the Podzinger experience, search and playback, with all the content that we had currently. And we did sort of sensitivity analysis around pre-roll and display and interactive type advertisements, because before we launched, we wanted to have some, just some background data to know what we were doing to our audience. And what we found, quite simply, the highlights of that analysis were that specifically young men don't mind advertising if it's entertaining. Duh, right? And in fact, they would like the ability to download the advertisement and share it. So there's sort of a viral advertising effect. And that's pretty cool. And it might be obvious, but it should not be overlooked. And we really, as a community, if this is the direction we're going to go, we need the ad creatives to develop that type of content, specifically for the niche audiences that we're delivering. And the second thing was we found that users couldn't really tell the difference between 7, 9, 12-second pre-roll advertising, and 15 seconds was the threshold. And if you made it 16 seconds, it might as well have been 3 minutes, and they were going to click off. So the moral of that story was keep it below 15 seconds. Less is better. Another duh point, but we now have the data to support it. And also, the final point is they like also to see how long the ad is going to be. So we actually screen them against that. And I think it's absolutely critical that you see either a timer or a slide bar or some sort of hourglass to tell you how much longer you're going to be eating this ad. So.
Yeah, I wanted to mention about your colleague Michael Kanellis on CNET has a really great story that's up. It went up last night about the Google ad deal with the new Mentos Coke thing, and they're publishing this another of the exploding Coke cans, and whether you like it or not, bottles, whether with the Mentos, whether you like it or not, it's very profound. Michael calls it groundbreaking, and I agree with him, because what's happening is Google is taking this ad at the end as a post roll, and they're sharing the revenue with the content developer, and they're doing this ad for Coke. Now, whether that works or not, I don't know. But the point is that ads inserted into content and shared with content developers, which is what Brightcove is doing and what Rever is doing, is very interesting. And I think the big picture here is that there's a huge demand for video. There's going to be, and also in the business space, in the enterprise space, and there's a lot of ways to monetize that, primarily through ads. I do want to mention, though, that I believe that downloadable for pay is going to happen. I know there's a great new site called Savory Cities that has wonderful restaurant reviews, and it's like $1 to save it. So instead of like buying the Zagat's or something. So I think for really useful service information, instructional information that's really valuable, you want to save, there are opportunities for content developers to charge some kind of a download.
One thing I have noticed actually is that the advertising, part of our discussion obviously is that we have to convince the advertising industry to make some changes, and that seems to have been easier in the audio space. And maybe this is just my observation, but in producing our podcast and inserting those ads, we've found the audience very accepting of a 15-second ad in the middle of a podcast, so much so that they even, because we've had the same advertiser for a year, consider that advertiser almost another character in our Buzz Out Loud podcast. But on video, and the advertiser's been very willing to work with us, make changes. On video, though, 30-second pre-roll. Boom. I mean, you're still getting that very intense pushback. And so do you feel like it's just the cost that's caused advertisers to be more resistant to kind of making changes that are appropriate to the media?
Are they repurposing ads from TV into the online space?
I think, and maybe some of you agree, that that's the pushback you get when you try to kind of solicit video advertising, is that they're saying, we've already spent a lot of money on a 30-second ad.
Seagate didn't have any ads, and so they didn't try to push anything like that with me. So.
Yeah, there's different ways. I mean, there's contextual ads. So Seagate has really nice signage association with Robert's show, and that's cool. Others have pre-roll, post-roll. I mean, I personally think like the Dow Jones news site, where you have to sit through like a 30-second or what seems like a pre-long pre-roll from Microsoft or other corporate sponsors. But it is the Wall Street Journal, and maybe you want to put up with it, There's a really good, the Crave video blog at CNET has a really nice pre-roll of the Honda Crave with Elvis, and it's kind of a cool little quick thing. It's okay. So I think but I think the pre-roll is definitely kind of dicey and kind of a turn-off unless it's done right. As opposed to, there's different things. There's a post-roll, meaning at the end. It could also be inserted in the middle. What's going to happen, I think, is we'll find that there will be like an introduction, like a TV show, like, hi, I'm Robert Scoble, I'm here, blah, 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 or something. And it could be an introduction, and then there could be a break, or there could be at the end, or there's going to be different ways. The other thing that's cool about the Google video ad for Mentos at the end is if you'll see there's a hyperlink on a kind of a translucent banner to the Coke promotion. So that's another thing where hyperlinks from ads are going to be, I think, more common, which is a cool thing. Because right now, if you see an ad, most ads are not hyperlinkable, So
I think that this is an interesting point that you just raised in the difference between audio and video advertising, and it's kind of just a nascent thought, but I wonder if it has something to do more with the idea that, in audio, consumers perhaps engaged in multiple things at the same time, and maybe unless your hand's right there at the dial and you're driving on the freeway or something, you can't change. Whereas with video, people are actually just staring at the box and able to skip or be offended by the ad. I don't know. I notice the only place that I skip radio ads is when I'm in my car. I'm painting a house on the weekends now, and I'm sitting there painting, and I can't, I can't stop to change the dial. And I wonder if that's just simply part of the reason.
Could be. Well, and then advertisers place a higher premium on that attention, too. I want to open it up to questions. I have a million more, and I think it would be too easy for us to get off track. And I know there are some right here. And then just to warn you, I'm going to have to repeat your question, so.
Getting back to Flash for a moment, Bob, especially with the IE7 coming out, there's some Flash issues people might not be aware of that I saw in terms of the embedded Flash and especially the embed tag. Those that are working some around familiar with any of that.
So the question basically is, are there concerns about Flash and IE7, essentially, especially with the embed tag, and what compatibility concerns might there be going forward?
I wasn't aware of those. I'll have to go look. I'm using IE7 on YouTube and Blip and Rever, and I haven't seen any problems specific to my machine, but
I heard yesterday, and I was curious.
I haven't seen it pop up. I read 200 feeds a night. I haven't seen it become a major issue yet, but I'll certainly watch for it.
Other questions?
For the audience, can you differentiate between an IPTV channel, podcasting, video blogging? How can you differentiate those in terms of applications?
So the question is, how would we differentiate between what is essentially referred to as an IPTV channel, a video blog, and a podcast? Okay. Well, I mean, an IPTV channel, I guess to me the short answer is that a podcast has so far been defined as audio as opposed to video, and then we usually use the term video podcast to differentiate the two. And it's really only called a podcast as opposed to an audio file because of the distribution method, which so far has been RSS, so that you can subscribe to it and receive a new one whenever there is one. An IPTV channel is kind of, at this point, the dream of the future, right? That if you create enough video and video podcasts and you're able to distribute them in a way that people are getting more video online or through their televisions via the internet, that would be an IPTV channel. That one's kind of still up in the air. Did that help at all? Not at all. Maybe we can talk after this. I have a question over here.
I'm just curious if that IPTV may have a live element to it as opposed to a recorded element. Podcasting would be something pre-recorded.
Certainly IPTV could have a live element, although I would say it's probably not required. Yeah.
IPTV to me is it's still for your bigger screen, and
Right.
and that I know I toured Cisco and Microsoft, who are both players in the IPTV space for they're trying to sell it to the cable and telephone systems because they want to bring a 25 or 30 megabit line out to your house and then serve 4 channels of high def TV right to your big screen.
Right.
That's quite a bit different than what I'm doing, which is delivering small screen video over the internet with an RSS feed through iTunes or through Podzinger or the various distribution points.
But I think a lot of this is going to migrate to the big TV screen, to the home TV screen, and for content developers, it's kind of important to maybe create files and think about that for the future because it's all going to converge.
Because definitely the promise of IPTV is that you have such a universe of niche content that's being developed that you will eventually not have to have traditional television programming, that you could subscribe to any one of these video podcast channels over your television through the internet. Which then enables a ton of targeted advertising, which is like a whole other
my show's only been available for about a month so far, and that's already the number one complaint is your file doesn't play on this.
Right.
Doesn't play on Xbox, because Xbox can deliver video every night. A new HD video shows up on my Xbox 360 through Xbox Live. It doesn't show up on Media Center, because you're using QuickTime format, and QuickTime's not loaded on my Media Center box. So you really, if you want to hit this broadest audience, you really have to think about all the various ways that video is going to be used through the internet, and really think about distribution.
I think
Maybe
I saw a
we'll go back to
question-
analog. And just
Maybe analog is, yeah. Everybody knows that format,
Like the
right?
last panel said, right?
So, if I understand your question, you can help me here. The question is, how do you maintain advertising in distribution versus
So like you subscribe and
okay. Oh, I see. We're talking about two different forms of subscription, I guess.
yeah.
Right? Okay. Yes. So when we say the subscription-based model, we mean will you pay a monthly fee to receive content, as opposed to will you subscribe using syndication technology so that whenever there's a new episode, you receive it even though it is free and ad-supported? Does that clarify? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you
That's
use
an excellent point.
Most
That
of
is
my
an
viewers
excellent
use iTunes to subscribe to my video, but they're not paying me for the privilege of downloading my video through the iTunes client or
Right.
through some of the other good clients are FireAnt.tv. What's the new one? There's Democracy Player, which is really nice, just got updated. And so I can use one of those players to download my content through an RSS feed or subscribe to it. But that's separate from the business model of paying a fee to it. My server just tracks how many subscribers I have on iTunes. And so my server is showing me three things: how many people hit the HTML page, how many people start a download, and then how many people complete a download. And it's the completion download figure that usually goes to the CPM models.
Right.
That's usually what advertisers want to see. Because we can't really study that you viewed a video, we just can study that you downloaded it. So.
Well, and one thing that's interesting about that, actually, in terms of this entire model, is that right now, Andy, you talked about brands wanting to be affiliated with content, and there's a certain feeling that advertisers just want to be in this market. They want to be on podcasts, and they want to be on video podcasts because it's super cool. And so far, they haven't asked us to prove that we have 300,000 subscribers or viewers. What do you see as kind of the technological hurdle in terms of, because we can't prove with podcasting, you may know, you can't prove that anyone listened to your podcast. You can only prove that they downloaded it.
You can show that there's some. I think there's a fourth metric, which is engagement.
Yeah.
My friend Buzz Bregeman, who's CEO of ActiveWords, was on a podcast that went on for almost 50 minutes. And he said, "Oh, there's no way anybody's listening to this boring podcast anymore." So he just threw it out that, "Oh, if anybody's still listening, I'll give you a free copy of my software. Just use this code when you come over to my website."
Right.
And he had 450 downloads, and he was blown away. He said, and that's a good way to demonstrate whether you have an engaged and listening audience rather than just a passive audience, or rather than just an audience that at one time subscribed to your content and just keeps subscribing in iTunes and keeps downloading and not watching it, not being actually there.
I think you need to, again, decouple the two elements of advertising to brand advertising and a little more transactional advertising. And certainly I could see moving towards a cost per action on the transactional side. I mean, if this audience that we're delivering is so targeted and so niche and so cool, I could see somewhere down the road that making sense. But I think the branding play, Nielsen or somebody, they're all working on it. What is it, Podbridge or Podtrack?
Right.
That
Well, Podbridge
is
has
assigning
a
plug-in, to track your activity. But
then how on earth do you convince consumers to download a plugin, give a bunch of marketing information, and then just get tracked?
there'd probably be some sort of package. The more I learn about how advertising is sold,
You need a little
it would
bribe
be
for that.
get a little branding here and a little transactional there. And
I think there's, Molly makes a good point that people want to be part of this whole thing now, and it's very exciting and cool to be associated with it. But we as content developers are going to have to prove, the worth, and that's different things. And the business-to-business space that I'm in and that Robert's in, people are going to say, yeah, I want to buy something, or I want to take action, or engage with the sponsor, or engage with the ad, and the advertisers will know if there's a practical, feedback either through direct action or through brand awareness. But we have to. I think we have it's a little bit of a honeymoon. I mean, I think in a sense, but the real results are going to be
Right.
demanded.
I
Now
like
might
this
be
engagement.
now might be the
metric.
best possible time to try to make money on your podcast because no one's going to be asking you for any proof.
Well, they will. You know,
They will.
Seagate,
I think the
Seagate might
podcast.
give me a 3-month slide, but if I try to get them to re-up, they're going to go, okay, let's talk numbers now. You know, you only have this amount of numbers, and you're charging me this. That's a little bit nutty because I can go over to FM Media and pay, a lower CPM and get more viewers. You know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Why
I
don't
was
you
going to
ask
say
another
that there's a question here.
Sorry.
Okay. You've had your hand up for a while.
Be so kind as to share some numbers with us on the percentage of people that are downloading your podcast in iTunes, and also if perhaps you've heard anything from Apple if they're going to start allowing flash-based models or an interactive model in iTunes that you can distribute.
So the question is, what percentage of our listeners or our audiences are downloading or using iTunes to subscribe or downloading in iTunes? And then have we heard anything about iTunes moving toward a more interactive model and/or Flash?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we don't provide a downloadable video yet, so we're just Flash-based. But
I don't have the stats. I'll look them up and post it on my blog.
We're seeing less than 20% of our users downloading, and that's through iTunes or Yahoo. We enable both. So
Yeah, I would say
One in
that
five.
the majority of our users do subscribe through. Certainly, the majority. I don't have the exact number. Subscribe through iTunes. Those that do subscribe, but we see a very surprising number listen to our podcast, and it's an audio podcast. Stream it from our webpage. So, I think that's a little bit of good news for advertisers who may want to buy banner ads. Still,
on your website.
yeah, they're going to the website. There was a question here.
Yes, question for Robert. We've heard a couple of times this morning where trying to stay in that 2 to 5 minute sweet spot. Your things, and granted, it's just beginning there. Take show, take form, Scoville show. Do you have a sweet spot that you're looking at, especially to maintain that engagement you've been talking about?
So the question for video bloggers particularly is, what's the sweet spot in terms of length that will keep users engaged?
I think we're going to be arguing for this for decades.
Yeah.
Because at Microsoft, everybody, my managers would say, edit your videos down and make them shorter. But I ended up with 4.3 million people showing up, so I won that argument. Most of my interviews, I go in and interview a CEO for 30 to 60 minutes, and I run that thing almost unedited, unless he said something he wasn't supposed to, and asked, and I haven't edited any video yet. And then I run a shorter demo, so somebody who wants to just see the product that he's talking about and understand that, I ask them to do a 2 to 5 minute demo, and usually they go to 10. But as long as it's interesting and engaging, and I'm getting something out of it, I usually let it run a little bit longer. But I'm going for 2 kinds of video. One, really in depth, where I really find out something about his business or her business, and something shorter where somebody from YouTube could come in and just watch a demo of Google Reader, for instance, and get something out of that.
Our average video log at Podzinger is about 8 minutes, but I think that's probably a little bit long. I don't know. And the average audio file is about 30. So.
I put up an interview with Steve Wozniak, which was an hour and 10 minutes, and about 10,000 people have watched that on Blip now.
Do you have data to show if they've watched the whole thing too?
No.
Okay.
See,
I don't know. I just know that they've completed a download, and those downloads are pretty hefty, so
Yeah.
that takes a pretty good commitment to download a 200 megabyte file.
yeah, I don't know why he has such big files, but that's another. I know there's been a lot of discussion of that. Oh my God, why would you download 200 megabytes to your computer, man?
They do.
Oh, geez. But here's
Because
the
I'm
thing.
sponsored by Seagate, I got to fill up your hard drive so you can buy
Okay, now we know. I've been wondering that. But here's the thing. All right, so on BTV, it's 2 to 5 minutes, which is generally, I think, a consumable. But for Robert's thing, since it's like going to lunch with Robert with some industry leader and really getting the information, or it's akin to going to a conference and you have an in-depth kind of experience. By the way, a lot of the video blogging thing, to my mind, is akin to the conference world. It's a way of meeting people and seeing people. And if he can have a great interview and keep the audience engaged, the long form is great. But I think that generally speaking, people, particularly in the work environment, are not in a position to consume too much more than 5 minutes.
It seems to definitely depend on the content.
complains about an hour-long Charlie Rose interview, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems to depend a lot on the content and the quality of the content, like literally how good it looks, because, you know, Charlie Rose, not a great set, but it's high video quality at least. There's a, ultimately, yeah, exactly, it is the relevance to the audience. And then again, I'm sure everyone watches your entire video, but it is faster to download a 200 gigabyte file than it is to watch it. So there's still the question of how do we prove that they've watched the whole thing?
Most of the viewers are watching in a browser, though, and like with Firefox, you
Right.
click on a QuickTime video, and it'll start downloading, and you can watch it while it downloads. So if it gets boring, you just cancel it. And that, since most of the audience is watching that way, the completion of video downloads is an interesting metric to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Question here?
I'm just curious about the shift in demographic of people who are, is video going to affect the breadth of demographic that's going to be observing content, and is it going to change, you know, for example, if you're interviewing someone like Wozniak, the people that may be watching that are going to be an older crowd that might sit still for that amount of time to watch that, whereas somebody with a shorter attention span who's grown up with, you know, things changing all the time might not sit through that, and the content would dictate, you know, sort of.
I don't know. My 12-year-old son watches Steve Jobs interviews for hours. You know?
So the,
Well,
so the
But he's
question
an
is,
Apple
the old
freak.
block.
Again, it goes back to the
the
relevance.
question
He's
is
an Apple freak,
how
you
will
know?
the demographic basically of video consumers
He listens to
affect
Don.
the length of the videos
Hours.
themselves?
Shift
Yeah.
in video shift that demographic.
Oh, I see. And will the new medium of online video shift that demographic at all?
it's really too early to say. I think that college kids and young people who kind of, you know, are into video, and that's cool, and they're totally used to it. You know, as far as the B2B space that I'm doing, people like to look at the videos, but I don't know, people like to look at the text, and they see the video on BTV as an image, and sometimes they'll look at it. You know, whether people in the business workday, in the business-to-business world have time or want to download, some do, not everybody does. You know, we're finding about maybe a third of the people who come to our site actually click on the video, which is kind of okay on one level. So I think that the early adopters, the people in the tech space, the young people, the college kids, they're going to sort of take the lead, just like they did with using iPods. So I think that it's going to happen, but it's kind of not really clear yet.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's sort of pushing the threshold a little bit on length. Are there other questions? There's one back here.
What do you guys do to keep costs down? Cost of storage, cost of streaming, cost of, and how do you address that with your customer base and make sure that you're not in a situation where it's costing you more to stream the product than it is to actually make money?
Right. So how do you keep storage bandwidth and production costs
If you're
down?
hosting it on your own servers, you got to be a ferocious negotiator. We're on Akamai, and we're not paying the dollar that they're quoting per gigabyte that you would get. You know, if you went in the website, you get a quoted one fee. Even CashFly, I sat down with owners at dinner, and they immediately have their cost just by having dinner together. So I know there's some negotiation power if you have a lot of video going on. But one way is to use the free services and then give up a little bit of your rights by putting it on, you know, Blip TV or Rever or Google Video like you do. And then you don't pay, Google takes on the bandwidth risk, and you take on some revenue sharing risk, right? Because all the revenue that goes to that, you don't get, right? You might, on many of these things, are giving you 50%. Like Podshow is usually giving you 40% along. So if they collect $1, they pass on 40. FM Media is collecting 40%, so they give you 60% of the dollar that they collect. So you have to decide, you know, where do you want to collect all the revenue, or do you want to collect part of it? For most of us who are small, sharing revenue makes a lot of sense because we can't afford ad salespeople unless you're a Podtech or a Podshow or a FM Media.
Yeah, but the cost to be at this party is very, very low. It's just not the way it was when you folks came to this conference a few years ago. So there are these free services. You can also publish your own flash. You can host video, you know, on your own server. It depends, like, you know, how big your files are and how popular you are. So that's very easy. And of course, the tools are very simple now with, you know, with Apple and iMovie and Final Cut and buying a terabit storage device for $800, and it's crazy. So it's very, very, the cost to entry. And I would urge everybody to get a digital camera, bring it back to your office. You could do on Windows Movie Maker. It's like a free thing. And you can open an account with any of these file sharing sites we talked about and do it. There's no barrier to entry.
Yeah, there's a good website called Free Blog, B-L-O-G. If you search Google for that, you'll find it. And they explain how to do it very well, how to get a free blog, video blog. Yeah.
Although certainly, I think the reason that we're having this panel partly in the first place is that at some point, while there may be a low barrier to entry, if your goal is to become popular and become well known, you will certainly start to incur bandwidth costs, especially if you're doing video, and that's going to be relatively staggering. And so, and then it becomes a trade-off between, as you said, the revenue share or compression that makes your file look a little worse but keeps the file size smaller, and then the scramble to make money to try to get advertising.
I've already reduced my quality one step, and I'm still way better than what you see on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. The other thing I would just say that when you think about publishing video in your enterprise or, for your kid's soccer team or whatever it is, publish it on a video blog. Open it up on, on Typepad for $14 a month or whatever, and you just drop the code that's created by any of these file sharing sites. You just drop it right in that, when you create a post and hit edit in HTML, you just drop it right in there. And magic, the player is there.
If you use Blip TV, and you use a WordPress blog like I do, it automatically writes the blog post for you from Blip. So you just upload the file, and it'll make the code and shove it over to WordPress for you automatically, and now you have a video blog post.
But publish in a blog platform. It's a democratic world, and there are tricks, but you'll be discovered.
We cache our partners' content, and we're in a co-location facility where we aggregate everybody together, and we get a better price through that. So any sort of Podzinger playback experience around your content will be handled by Podzinger.
So the short answer is sign on with someone else or find a way to get advertising. I wish Leo Laporte were here, actually, because he spent, a year or more saying that he didn't want to take advertising for This Week in Tech, but then he spent that same year talking about the staggering bandwidth cost that he was incurring and ultimately chose advertising. So,
we're helping
at some point you may, if you get big enough, you may get to the point where you can't keep costs down enough. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Leo is one of our flagship customers around monetization of the archive search, so we're helping them with it.
The specter of Leo is everywhere when you discuss podcasting. I think I saw a hand over there. You guys, don't you have any questions on this side of the room? Am I ignoring you? All right, I'll get to you as soon as this guy, because his hand did go up first. Okay.
I just want to know how important it is to control the distribution of the content through the air, so it becomes someone who's making some money out of it, or necessarily participated.
So how important is it to control the distribution of your content? Do you care if someone else gets it, may make money off it?
That totally depends on your monetization model. Zay Frank hates it, right? Because he wants you to come back to his website and engage with him on his community and see his brand and see his other stuff. And he wants to control the experience of you watching the video. At Microsoft, we put all the video out in Creative Commons, and we didn't care. In fact, we wanted you to take the content over to YouTube or somewhere else and redistribute it, because that would have helped our message, right? And at PodTech, I'm still arguing internally about it, because I want distribution, but I also want the ability to make money from our advertisers and be able to watch what the traffic is, so I can quantify that to an advertiser.
Certainly at CNET, one of the big complaints about our service was that our videos were not downloadable for a long time, and it was a choice that the company made because we were wrapped in advertising. And so you do want to, if you make the choice to be beholden to advertising, then you do find yourself in the position of maybe wanting to control distribution a little bit versus letting that content be free and branding, which is what we've ultimately decided to do, so, which I'm totally for. Okay, sir. I think it may be better if you talk to us after the panel about net neutrality, because it might be slightly off topic for right now. But I personally would be happy to talk to you about it afterward. if that's okay. Okay. Other questions?
Back there.
Back there? So the question is the range of CPMs at this point in this industry. Well, I mean, I guess I can say from my perspective that that is one of the interesting things is that this medium is so nascent right now that we're still everyone's still arguing the
Yeah.
CPM question, and no one knows. And frankly, no one knows if CPM is even going to be the model. We've talked about it a lot here, but my personal feeling is that that probably ultimately will not be the model because of the metrics problem that we have. That ultimately CPMs, it's going to be a hard sell if we can't prove that the cost per 1,000 is actually 1,000 listens.
Do you know what your CPM is at CNET? Or not sure. Not really.
If you partner with,
I'm on the edit side.
with an ad network, you'll probably see $2 to $5. If you go direct to an agency, then the range is probably 20 is a good starting point. That's what we're seeing anyway, and all the way up to 80. And there's another subtle point there, and there are probably the geo-targeting element of advertising, in which we have a partner, weei.com, which is Red Sox Radio, so we have all their interviews, and the CPMs there are much higher because the ability to sell a local campaign.
Go ahead here. That Scoble is a profound man. The question is about that fourth metric of engagement and how we quantify that, and how important that will be as we do try to continue to sell advertising going forward, or just engage an audience.
It's tough. I mean, my friend Buzz, who's CEO of ActiveWords, had a 5-star review in USA Today on the front page of their business section, and the journalist the day before the article came out called him up and said, "Oh, get your servers ready. You're about to have the biggest day of your lives. We just gave you the best review we could possibly give you." Da da da. And he had 32 downloads. And I linked to him on one post, a little bit later, this big, and said, "I love ActiveWords," and he got 430 downloads or something like that, which to me is a good example of engagement, but very hard to quantify and keep track of. I certainly know from my refer log who has good engaged audiences. Like Leo Laporte, when I was on his podcast, several people around the world called me on my cell phone and said, "I love that show," and I hadn't gotten that kind of reaction from other podcasts I'd been on. So I knew that he had a very engaged audience. But again, how do you tell that to an advertiser?
Right.
How do you quantify it?
It takes a forward-thinking advertiser, I think, to understand that engagement is something that you want to be affiliated with. And we have found that our primary sponsor at Buzz Out Loud is our sponsor for exactly that reason. We have an incredibly engaged forum. When we talk about a topic on that podcast, we will hear from the people directly involved. If we talk about David Pogue, we will get a call from David Pogue and say 50 million of your users emailed me because you said whatever we said. It was maybe not nice. I don't know.
They gave us this one.
Oh, yeah.
They gave
So
us-
we have one more question. I was told earlier that we are heading into lunch after this, so that if you wanted to give up maybe 5 more minutes of your lunchtime, you could. Or you can maybe just come up and talk to us afterwards. So we'll do one last question. Although you've had a lot of questions.
Yeah, about the ducks you
I don't
just
think it's gonna
mentioned.
be you.
Go to Zay Frank and look at his org. It's on the right side, and you can click on that and see how many people have joined his community. And he's been video blogging for, a year now? And he's going to stop video blogging on March 17th, I think he told me. So he's just doing a 1-year podcast, basically, and he's already built an audience of 30,000 engaged people, which is really interesting.
So is there one last question before we break?
One
Oh,
more.
right in the back there. Oh, the question again is about net neutrality. I absolutely agree that it impacts everything we're talking about. I think my concern was that it's a very long discussion. If there are some of you who'd like to stay, maybe we can wrap up the session now. Maybe if there's some of you who'd like to stay, we could talk about it now. Well, defining what it is itself a long discussion. I mean, I think net neutrality basically is an ongoing debate right now about who's going to control the speed of the internet. There's a move afoot by the telecommunications industry toward a tiered internet model wherein content providers like Google or Yahoo or Microsoft might pay more to have content delivered more quickly and more reliably. So there would be an upper tier of internet delivery versus kind of a common tier of internet delivery that other people would fall into. So opponents of this, who are pro-net neutrality, as they've dubbed it, believe that that would create an unfair system on the internet and that it would also enable telecommunications providers to potentially degrade delivery of content from companies that didn't pay as much, is the short answer there. So so certainly, yes, it affects everything that we're talking about here, because if you are starting a new podcast, a small video blog, a small media network, and you are in the position of not being able to pay for faster delivery, you may, the fear is that you will find yourself caught in a slow lane. It's pretty undecided. It's pretty up in the air at this point, and there are a lot of
Which would mean
opinions
the
about it.
big guys can do bigger, nicer video. The small guys like us would have to stick with smaller, more compressed video,
Right.
et cetera.
And
Yeah.
potentially risk, having your quality degraded further by the telcos, which they say they wouldn't do. So that's it in a nutshell. We'll wrap for lunch now, but I'm happy to hang around and talk about.
Thanks for coming.
more. Thanks everyone for coming.